This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 776, recorded on Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020. It's time for a change. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we will fill your head with fox life, brain disease, and misery. But first,
thanks to the Burroughs Welcome Fund and our Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. The looting has got to stop. No excuse for it. The opportunistic nature of the looters should be met with force, military if necessary. I speak, of course, about the last round of tax cuts for the already rich, which amounted to $2.3 trillion in looting from the federal government, adding trillions to our national debt and giving us nothing in return. What else would $2.3 trillion have paid for? 295 years of the National Science Foundation's budget, or the elimination of all current student debt in the United States, plus 102 years of the National Science Foundation's budget, or enough to triple the federal spending on public schools, every single one of them. When we see looting, we react as we should. It is wrong and something should be done about it. But let us be clear-eyed when we call for force to resolve it. Let us add up the actual cost, count the ways in which those dollars have been taken from us. And let us direct our outrage where it is most deserved, which is anywhere but This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again with all the wild things happening around the United States and around the world, even within the last week, months. It's been a crazy ride, but we're here to talk about science. And today we have a bunch of fun science to talk to you about. I've got stories about the pre-mentioned foxes and their lives. I also have some psychology for you related to protests. And I've got a link for you that we will share on our website later on related to Black scientists and science in general. And I've got geoengineering problems. Ooh. Justin, what did you bring?
Very interesting. Okay, what did I bring? I brought, let's see. I've got hemorrhaging brain.
Oh, great.
I've got triple negative breast cancer. And I got a Dead Sea Scroll puzzle.
Very nice. We like puzzles. That's what everyone's been doing during COVID.
Yeah, we're all out of them, so finding one from the Dead Sea would be
There's
good.
a new one. Just came out.
That's great.
New one. And Blair, what's in...
25,000 pieces.
Oh, jeez. Not a challenge at all. Be done by tomorrow.
And they don't necessarily go together. It's that fun.
All right. Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have royal jelly. I have a story about how misery loves company, and I have your dog to the rescue.
Thank you very much. We could go on with the show. How can we make things better? There's a lot going on right now that needs to change. There are some organizations that are working toward that change. One in particular is Campaign Zero. You can find them at joincampaignzero.org. It's a group of people who are working to have zero deaths from police violence moving forward. You can also find information on the methods that they suggest for police forces around the country to adopt in order to reach that goal. And they have another website called 8 Can't Wait. That's 8can'twait.org. So if you're interested in these things, I recommend you check them out because it's a way that we can move forward and really see some change. And this is data-backed practice.
And I'll say I looked at 8can'twait.org when you sent it, Kiki, and I am not done with my own education, let me tell you, because I clicked on that link. I saw the 8 ways that we're that could help reduce that number, that terrible number. And I saw the list and I thought that I would assume that was all currently happening everywhere, and it is not. And that was earth-shattering for me and devastating. And I'm very privileged that I didn't know that because I haven't been faced with any of those problems before. But yeah, it's a good reminder that we all have a lot of educating to do.
Yep, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. There is something rotten in the state of Denmark, for sure.
No, actually, Denmark's quite lovely. It's the United States that is a festering pool at the moment of the worst pandemic, and we're getting mocked, of course, by Iran and China for our civil rights. I'm sorry, that's also ridiculous.
It's time for a hard reboot.
Telling,
I'm not quite sure how to get that done, but it's seeming like disruption is the way to get big change. So I get it.
As Obama said today in his web stream, it's not just protest or voting. It's protest and voting. You protest to get people's attention, and then you vote to make change. And that's what we're doing.
So I actually think that the community that that should possibly be focused on more is outreach to police departments, to be vocal, not to be really vocal about when they see other police departments doing things like this, because it does affect their ability to have that connection to their community and police peacefully. I feel like there's maybe something that the union doesn't allow people to speak out against other people in the same union somewhere else. But if that's the case, it needs to change. We need members of the police community to what's that?
Police themselves. Yes,
to really be more vocal, and I think that's part of the problem. There hasn't been that loud voice from police departments across this country saying how much they condemn things that they see going on in other police departments or specific activities, or pointing out police and saying that is not something that follows the ethic of policing in America. That's really what needs to be added to the conversation, and the fact that it's missing is part of the problem.
So as we jump into the show here to talk about the science, I do want to remind you that subscribing to the TWIS podcast is how you can get us in your ears every single week. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook. Look for This Week in Science in those places, and on any podcast directory. You can find our website at twis.org. That's TWIS.org. All right, so let's talk about science. I've got a story, about protests and psychology. So there is a recent study out looking into the psychology of how people are influenced by extreme actions during protests. So actions such as blocking traffic or breaking windows, things that lead to more violence, or that include more violence, or I guess affect the flow of people's lives who are not involved in the protest. This is published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. The author on the study said that he's interested in social change and progress and was curious what social movement strategies might be most effective at influencing popular opinion. They did 6 different experiments with 3,399 participants and looked at how different types of protests and behaviors influenced support for progressive causes, conservative causes, Black Lives Matter, anti-abortion movement. They found a whole bunch of stuff, but things like blocking traffic, inflammatory words, and vandalism consistently reduced popular support for social movements. Now, this study was performed well before the extent of what we're experiencing right now, where so many people are disenfranchised at the moment. So many people are responding to inequalities, injustices, racism. And so I don't know how well this particular experiment particularly applies to what we're seeing right here and now today. But looking online on social media, it's, you see people start to turn away from the protests and turn away from supporting the protests as vandalism takes place, as violence takes place, whether or not it's instigated by the police or the protesters.
And honestly, it's usually somewhat separate. Like, there's usually a protest, and then opportunistically, as the police are focused on the protest, there is looting going on elsewhere, or it's happening after the protest is ended, but there is still a large enough crowd. So, it's harder. Yeah.
I do think this might be different, because what I'm hearing, what I'm kind of reading between the lines there, is that people might get frustrated with protest if it I'm not trying to make this trivial, but if it kind of inconveniences them, right? So I think about like breaking, like messing up traffic and stuff. Okay, so right now, all of our lives are inconvenienced to a crazy degree because of shelter in place and all this pandemic stuff going on.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, the response to this might be way different.
Yeah.
Because who cares? You block the freeway. I don't have anywhere to go.
Nobody's going anywhere anyway.
Not to mention, we are all consuming media and to a crazy degree right now, which it gives an opportunity to have more of a constant dialogue as to the reasoning behind the protest that might not have happened before. People are less distracted by other daily things that aren't happening as much.
Yeah. So anyway, the researchers go on to say activists outraged by the status quo and or believing that change is largely impossible may engage in extreme protest actions as a form of self-expression or even catharsis without any strategic calculations about the effects such behavior will have in the long run. Similarly, even if a movement plans not to engage in extreme behaviors, a small number of dissidents in the group may incite extreme actions in others. So there is a bit of a dilemma there, and it is something to be taken into account. But yeah, we may be in a different kind of situation in the current time period. Yeah.
Well, there's also a tremendous amount of propaganda going on around this. I mean, the idea that say in the parallel world where all of the protesters are demolishing the city, and it is specifically them. Okay, what are they doing it for then? Civil rights. Okay, what are other ways that cities get rioting and looting takes place? When the hockey team wins or loses the big game.
Yeah,
when the baseball
really fair
team
point.
wins or loses the big game. When your football team won the Super Bowl, you flipped over cop cars and set them on fire. Like, stop with the double standard, first of all.
Yeah, that's very true. Nobody called the National Guard then.
No, absolutely not. Why? Probably because there was a lot of white faces on the streets. That's why. So let's not have that double standard. Also, people are talking about Antifa, who's killed no one. If you are against anti-fascists, wait till you experience actual fascists, and then tell me you're still against anti-fascists. Like, I feel like we're in a sea of ignorance and having just the basic conversation sometimes about what's taking place in our time. And I will stop now.
All right.
I put a cap on the time that I would do that.
Okay. But I absolutely agree with your point. Yeah. Yes.
We need to get people talking to each other. That's what
we do. And and there is also the point at which there are difficult conversations that we need to have. Maybe some people need to be inconvenienced to see what's happening in the world around them. So there is awareness, and there's a way to bring awareness. But okay, moving on to some more science.
If I can have one more second, just because I just got to follow what you said. Do either of you remember the Rodney King protests?
Yes.
No, you don't. No, you don't remember the protest. You remember the rioting. You remember the rioting that caught fire to the city and made the police department absolutely redefine itself.
Yep.
You do not remember the protests because they went unnoticed. So,
got it.
To your point, Kiki, you sometimes have to grab attention, not just have a slogan and walk in the street.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm gonna mute myself because I won't
argue.
I'm gonna mute myself.
And I'm going to bring you to another study that might get Justin talking. This one is related to the Russian fox experiment that he's talked about many times, the Siberian Tret fox experiment. However, that experiment is it's a lab experiment. These foxes were put into caged, kenneled situations. They were domesticated. These foxes were taken in and domesticated, and the researchers have been watching to see what kind of changes occur to the foxes. They've seen a shortening of the muzzle and a broadening of the head. They've seen changes in the fur. They've seen changes in the behavior of the animals as well. And so these are all adaptations that have been taken to imply that there is a domestication effect on animals. Potentially, we're even domesticating ourselves, as some other studies have gone on to say. But a natural experiment has taken place in which researchers in Glasgow realized there were a bunch of foxes coming into the urban areas of the city and not necessarily being domesticated, but living within the urban environment. And they wanted to know if there was a change between actual physical change between the urban living foxes and their rural counterparts. So there were a bunch of fox skulls that had been collected in Scotland because these foxes are just kind of living there. They had 1,500 skulls, which is a pretty big sample size. They were collected between 1971 and 1973. And so the researcher decided to take a look at these fox skulls and indeed was able to find a difference. The urban foxes had that shorter muzzle and the shorter and broader muzzle. And what they think this has to do with is living off of human cast-offs. There are oftentimes bones that are cast off. And so the hypothesis now is that the skulls, the jaws of these foxes have to get stronger to be able to chew the castaway food items from humanity. Yeah, so it's just this stronger bite as opposed to speed, which the rural counterpart is thought to be quote unquote designed for.
So you're saying it was their jaws, their mandible, right?
The mandible, yes.
Okay, so that makes sense from what I know about animal skulls, because up here in your zygomatic arch, I think is what it's called, is in front of your bite muscles. Mm-hmm. So you can actually feel that. If you bite down, you can feel muscles kind of right next to your eyeballs. That is your bite muscle. And on like cats and wolves, that arch is huge because those are the giant muscles. But if you look at like a horse, this bone, your mandible, is huge. And that's because that's the chew muscles. Right. And so on animals that are just that swallow things whole or rip off whole pieces of meat and then swallow those whole, their mandible's still pretty small because they're not doing much chewing. So one of the big differences between wolves and domestic dogs is you see a much bigger, wider mandible for chew muscles to exist. That fits right in there.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah. And the other interesting finding was that there was less room for the brains of the urban foxes.
Sure.
Urban foxes have smaller brains than their rural counterparts. Why would that be? The idea is that maybe the brains don't have to be as big because the foxes aren't really that worried about predators or other animals in the urban situation, and they just have to stand still at one place and eat as opposed to constantly potentially be on the move.
Yeah, food is always there. They're not
Yeah.
trying super hard. Yeah, absolutely.
I encountered a fox at the Hearst Castle that was oddly on top of a hedge, like standing
For
on top
the
of it eating the
peacocks, I
berries.
bet. Coming after the peacocks.
No, it was eating like berries or something off of this hedge. But what was interesting is like we walked past it and it wasn't the least bit skittish of humans in any way. I didn't measure its skull though. I should have thought of that at the moment. See where the skull measurements were. I could have compared it
I've
to
heard
the
that some
study.
of the other critters at Hearst Castle are very friendly as compared to their wild counterparts.
But yeah, they've sort of created an environment where there are no sort of predators allowed on the grounds. They used to have like all kinds of zoo animals too, but those are mostly gone
They use
now.
zebras still, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, foxy things at Hearst Castle. But yeah, foxes, urban foxes, smaller brains, better bites. Maybe that has to do with domestication. Blair, did you want to give us a silver lining for our COVID update for the week?
Yes. So COVID, still bad. I'm not going to say it's not bad. Things are bad.
No, it's
Okay?
bad.
Still, wear your mask. Don't touch each other. It's still not good. However, it's fundamentally changing the way that we behave in a lot of ways for many, many, many years to come. And so this is actually a study. It's a large poll conducted looking at Americans. It was over 2,000 adults over the age of 18 in May. And it was looking at self-care in a post-pandemic world. So this in general, 46% of Americans report that they are struggling to find a way to maintain their whole health during the pandemic. So that can include physical, mental, and spiritual health. But the silver lining here is that 80% of those people polled plan on being more mindful of practicing self-care post-pandemic. So there's a lot of reasons that could be, probably because most people that are stuck at home, we've talked about before, and I shared in the newsletter, are showing some sign of grief and stress. And so everybody's kind of strung out right now. And so it also gives us a moment to kind of look inward and look at how we take care of ourselves. So about 35% of those polled are practicing more creative activities. 31% are praying more. 31% are engaging in more meaningful conversations with friends and family. And 64% say that they are more focused on mental health now than ever before. So it's because it's okay. So 30% of Americans report a lack of energy. 29% report difficulty sleeping and exercising less, and 47% report feeling socially isolated. So all of those things together mean that people are actually taking this opportunity to think about how they're going to take better care of themselves in the future. Also because the other kind of leap that was brought here, looking at these findings and extrapolating from them, is that, this is a time when a lot of us need healthcare more than we ever have before, either because of physical problems related to COVID or not, or mental problems related to all that stuff we were talking about. And ironically, as we have frustratedly talked about before, because healthcare is linked to jobs and unemployment is crazy high, at a time when people need healthcare most, a lot of people can't have it.
Yeah.
And so that also is putting into stark contrast when people may have had health insurance before and didn't take advantage of it. So both of those things together make it likely that people may pay better attention to their own mental and physical well-being when we all get out of our houses.
I think there's another side of it also, which is that since everybody's in this together, we're all, not, there are those frontline workers, the essential workers who have been going into work, but so we're all under stress in different ways. But because of that, we are aware that others are under stress, and there's a little bit more consideration from other people as well. You get on a Zoom call. How are you doing? Is one of the first questions that's asked. Whereas before, it might be you jump on the call and somebody's immediately asking you what you've gotten done, and if have you hit your metrics for the week, and blah blah blah. Things have slightly slowed down, and the priorities have shifted. I mean, people still want to get things done, but there's more societal care.
Yeah, it's definitely brought into stark contrast what is essential.
Yeah.
Right.
Although
So
I have heard that there has been a lot of stress eating taking place. Yes. The statistic I think I heard was that 63% of Americans are now 74% of Americans because of this.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Something along those lines of an increase in the amount of Americans that they are.
But I mean, what Kiki was talking about and what I was talking about put together means maybe people will be better about advocating for themselves and taking days off when they need them, which is another piece of this.
Yeah, it's a hope that as a society we can move forward in a healthier way for our work. We've been a very work-driven society, achievement-driven society, but maybe there are healthier ways to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
there are healthier ways to do that.
It took me 20 years to really figure out what a mental health day was, which, it's talked about like it's, oh, you're taking a mental health day, huh? But they're actually super important. And now I can recognize that and go, oh my gosh, I need a day. I'm going to take a day. I am no good to anybody today. My mental health is also important. I don't have to be snotty and coughing to say that I can't be at work.
Yeah. So, my mental health can usually be cured in about 15 minutes.
I know what you're talking about. Or 7.
Or 7 something. It just depends on the temperature of the day.
Yeah. All right, Justin. Let's move on from silver linings to brain damage.
Okay, shall we?
That seems appropriate.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So we have talked quite a bit over the years about the gut-brain connection, how things seemingly unrelated to cognitive functions actually have this connection to bacterial communities in our intestines, which at first seemed impossibly strange. But as evidence has piled on over the years, is now sort of a normal way of looking at things. Now we have a study showing that people with a rare genetic disease that causes brain bleeding have gut microbiomes that are made up of distinct bacteria. More than a correlation here, it is molecules produced by this bacterial imbalance that are causing lesions to form in the brains of the patients. As discovered in this study. This is the first in any human neurovascular disease to show this correlation or the even causation. So it has implications not just for treating the particular disease that they were studying here, but they can use this maybe now to examine other neurovascular diseases that they never thought to inquire into the gut microbiome to see if there was a connection to the patients. Study was led by investigators at the University of Chicago Medicine, published May 27th in Nature Communications. It examined the gut bacteria patients with cavernous angioma. It's a disease where blood vessel abnormalities develop in the brain, causing strokes, seizures, and other serious neurological complications. It is caused, and I'm doing air quotey things because this is sort of how it has been looked at in the past, caused by genetic mutation in the lesion, which may be inherited and also can occur sporadically. So it's both an inherited disease and one that's not linked to heredity. and its severity, and of course, vary widely among its patients. So, investigators had hints in the past that there could be a gut microbiome link. This is senior author Issam Awad, who's a medical doctor, professor of neurosurgery, and was a partner in a previous study in mice, which showed that the cells that lined the blood vessels of the brain reacted to changes in the animal's gut bacteria. The implications of that were very big, he said, and I am saying in quotey voice, which may not represent his actual voice, but we didn't know if this concept of a unique microbiome that favors the development of lesions would be true in human beings. To find out, the researchers working with investigators at the University of California, San Francisco, University of New Mexico, University of Pennsylvania, and the Angioma Alliance Patient Support Group, as well as UChicago, collected stool samples from more than 120 cavernous angioma patients. Samples were then analyzed for bacterial content compared to samples from people who in the general population who did not have the disease. And they found a combination of 3 common bacterial species whose relative abundance allowed them to, as if in a blind lineup, they could tell, aha, this one will have it, that one will not, with absolute certainty. Quotey voice, the cavernous angioma patients from all the different collection sites had the same distinctive microbiome, regardless of whether they inherited the mutation or had sporadic lesion, regardless of the number of lesions they had, Awad says. The investigators further showed that patients produced, this is a long word, so give me a moment, lipopolysaccharides. Oh, that's what's too hard. Molecules, so which travel through the bloodstream. This is from the gut through the bloodstream to the brain and then attach themselves to the brain's blood vessel lining. So now we have a molecule produced in a bacteria in your intestines that works its way to the brain, the lining of the vessels in the brain, facilitating then lesion development. All this evidence, this is quotey voice of Awad again, all this evidence pointed to the microbiome as a cause of lesions rather than an effect. So there could have been the argument, right, that you have something.
Wow.
You have a correlation. There's gut bacteria, there's brain. But the communication is supposed to be two ways. So maybe the lesions in the brain are causing some sort of failed reaction in the gut or the intestines. But no, it's absolutely the opposite way. It is the bacteria in the intestines who are able to create and causally affect these lesions in the brain. So the next step, of course, is to look at ways to create treatments. They do caution that just doing antibiotics or probiotics, you're pulling levers, you could make it worse. Right? You don't just wait for a little bit more science to be done before you start attempting this, because you don't
just
know.
Poking buttons. What does this do? What does this do? What does this do?
Yeah, and you could make yourself more susceptible to lesions by doing so. But an amazing, because we talk a lot when there's these correlations. A lot of these studies have been correlative. See this? We see this over here. It seems to be related to that over there, but no mechanism. We haven't figured out. This is mechanism too, so it's really stunning.
That's amazing. This is the first kind of study that has gone beyond correlation to give us some kind of causality, give us mechanism to, I think there's still so much to be pulled apart there. How do different bacterial species interact in a population to lead to healthy versus disease states? Which species are specifically the bad ones? How do we get rid of those? How can you monitor your bacterial microflora, right? How can you figure all that stuff out?
And it's something that's interesting here too is, and I haven't done the deep dive in the paper or the previous research that found the hereditary links, but they make me wonder now if they exist, because within a family you will share microbiota. So there is this odd, like you have to, it's a tough thing, but you have to separate microbiota that is passed down from generation to generation within households, within the grandparents' house, and it's in your house, and it's in your bed sheets, and it's in the couch, and it's the family eating together that's sharing.
Like mother dough.
Yeah, it's okay. They were perfect. Yeah, perfect for those of you who have dedicated your current lives to a yeast dough sample.
A yeast baby? I have a yeast baby.
Yeast babies. Previous correlations of genes may also be actually the generational sharing of microbiota that aren't actually related to those genes, so there's a lot of digging left to be done.
So much digging, but so fascinating. I mean, I can't wait until we get to that point in time where we do know which foods are going to help us, which bacteria we should have in our probiotic yogurt drink, where these things are individualized as opposed to, just being a catch-all.
Everybody's just eating prescription yogurt from now on.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to eat, have my prescription fiber and yogurt morning food. I mean, it sounds silly, but also how much better would that be than a cocktail of drugs? To be able to just eat your medicine as your
Wait.
Way better.
Wait. What are the drugs?
Fair. Depends what they're for, right? Is it treating the symptom or the cause, or is it just fun?
Or is it just fun? We all need a little bit of fun these days.
I'm saying if it turned out to be eating cinnamon made you live forever, I would still need a drug that simulated what cinnamon did. You know what I mean? Like there's something. Red peppers?
Right.
No,
because you have that cinnamon not liking response.
Cinnamon and red peppers.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your microbiome. Maybe if you're the right microbiome, you'd like them.
Oh, no, I have the right microbiome. I poop in under 12 seconds.
All right. If you just tuned in, you are listening to This Week in Science. And if you're interested in a TWIS shirt or a mug or face mask, head over to TWIS.org, click on the Zazzle store link, and browse our store. We have face masks now. And now, it is the time for Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Well, I have a study that kind of rocked my world a little bit, my understanding to the core of what makes a queen bee. What makes a queen bee? Do you two know?
Royal jelly?
Yeah. Turns out, no. So this study kind of challenged that long believed belief, understanding that queenliness comes from the diet of royal jelly, a milky white secretion of protein, water, and fat, and delicious, coming from the heads of nurse bees. But this new paper looks at what specifically makes a queen, and it doesn't appear to be the jelly itself. It appears to just be the amount of food that they eat. So whoever becomes the biggest becomes the most important. There are hormonal changes that come from that, and that is what makes a queen bee. So this is a study from North Dakota State University. They had previously studied bees from species where each female lives alone and raises their own young, and discovered that the body size of these solitary bees depended on the amount of food their mother gives them. So they wanted to see how the amount of food relates to social honeybees. So in this controlled experiment, they raised larvae in a lab in 9 different diets with different amounts of royal jelly and sugar. The bees who ate the most food were indistinguishable from queens raised in a hive. And their ability to turn into queen did not depend on the proteins or sugars are being fed royal jelly. Scientists know what hormones and genes are responsible for queen development, but they don't know kind of what the trigger is there for the hormones and genes to do what they do. So they don't exactly know how the hormones and genes change, because it appears to just be with the amount of food. Those two things start to change. This could have a huge implication for the bee industry, besides just totally blowing our perception of what makes a queen bee out of the water. If we know better what makes a queen, there's actually an opportunity for the people who raise bees for commercial honey or for pollination of agriculture, that they often will replace their queens every year. And so if they know how to make queens and can do that, that can actually help with the bee industry. So they could actually increase resilience of the commercial beekeeping industry by being able to do that. So there's pretty cool implications here, but also that's just one of those things that you take for granted in biology. What makes a queen? Royal jelly. Duh.
Not really. No.
Just fed a lot.
It's whoever eats the most royal jelly first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which actually,
Give me that royal jelly.
I knew from some sort of sci-fi episode of like an Outer Limits reboot or something like this.
Futurama, too.
A farmer is eating lots of royal jelly and then turns into a bee. That's how I knew that. That's honestly how that information got to my brain.
Next, I have a story that we could all probably relate to right about now. It's all showing some signs of stress, as we talked about at the start of the show. Well, this is a study.
I don't know what you're talking about, Blair.
Okay, well, macaques. A study on macaques show that misery does indeed love company. What I mean by that is this University of Vienna and Biomedical Primate Research Center in Reykjavik, Netherlands. It's lots of consonants, not a lot of vowels. They were studying macaques and their stress levels when working towards a goal by themselves, with a stranger, or with a bonded dyad, so basically a close friend. So in order to be able to do that, the first thing they had to do was try to teach the macaques that lived in this lab how to provide a saliva sample on demand. So I love that. Is first they taught the macaques how to spit into something. So that's great.
I don't know if that's great.
I mean, that's science. That's like animal science to the. Oh, that's so cool. That's animals get to participate in experiments voluntarily. That's so neat. Anyway, so they first did that. Then they noted who had chosen to bond with another monkey, so they could identify dyads and monkeys that were alone. And then they taught the monkeys how to use a string to pull a platform close enough to retrieve a piece of food. And in some cases, one monkey could do it, and in other cases, they'd manipulate it so you'd need a friend. So they would have a monkey pulling from two different sides to make it work. So that you'd need the teamwork. And after each trial, they would test cortisol levels to see how stressed they were. So they found that the monkeys who were paired with a bonded friend had the lowest levels of cortisol. So they were least stressed from the monkeys that were doing it by themselves, the monkeys that had help from a stranger. So and it makes sense. If you think about any situation where you've been in a ridiculous scenario, or you've been stressed out, or you've been scared, or there's been any sort of stressor on you, if you had somebody you knew with you, it probably was a little less stressful. It was comforting to have that person. That's where misery loves companies, right? So this is this whole idea that if they're in the stressful situation, like, I want this food, but I have to do this thing. But if they're there with a friend, it's a little less scary or stressful. It's like having your little security blanket, little friend there. So
I think that's fantastic. Being able to show that these monkeys and To your point, yes, they weren't forcing the cortisol from the monkeys. They weren't taking blood draws that were really stressful, or, having to handle the monkeys, which can be stressful to be able to get
can manipulate
the spit,
your variables.
which manipulates, when the human handling, the human interaction aspect is a big factor that researchers really have to think about when they're talking about stress experiments. Like, how much is the human stressing the animal out versus, how much is the cortisol's just up? That's just it for all of them. But that's I love that they. I think they do have to worry about now the rhesus macaques just deciding to spit at the researchers.
I'm sure that that's not going to increase because of the study. This is already happening.
Or decrease. Or decrease. It's also not going down.
Maybe they realized the macaques were already spitting at them and said, maybe we can put this to good use.
Oh, I can capture that behavior. Yeah. There you go. It's like sometimes they had to collect that from a face shield that they were wearing, but still got the spit in the long run.
Yeah. Oh, friends. Yeah. I think I like company when I'm not feeling good.
And if I can extrapolate this to our human scenario, which this was not a study on humans, so I'll say that right away. But think about people who are self-isolating alone versus in family groups or with a partner or even with a roommate. It's very different. And it could be because you're going through a stressful situation, either alone or with somebody that you're bonded to in whatever way. And so check on your friends that live alone.
But don't spit on them.
Don't spit on them.
No. That's not the takeaway.
Yeah, the takeaway, let's check in on each other.
Yeah. Justin, how you doing?
Let's do that.
How am I doing?
Yeah.
You don't have time.
Fair enough.
To go into it all. Maybe the after show.
You don't have time. Yeah. You're still young. You have your whole life ahead of you. I don't want to shatter your perspective of what it means to live a long life on this planet.
Oh, long lives. Yes, this is why people like to have children, so that when they're old and miserable, they still have company. Yes.
True.
All right. I'm going to take a very, very, very quick break right now to thank you for listening to TWIS. You are the reason that we do what we do week in and week out, bringing you science news, trying to discern what is truth, what is fake news, where is this reality that we're experiencing, and what can we agree on is reality, right? Let's talk about these things in a very down-to-earth way. Let's try to get away from the craziness of the world that's out there every once in a while. Once a week, right? We can bring that sane perspective, and it's thanks to you. So with your help to continue this, we can continue to bring TWIS to you every week. If you head to This Week in Science's website, twis.org, click on the Patreon link and support us at a level of your choosing. $10 a month, and you will be thanked at the end of the show. We can't do this without you. Thank you for your support.
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science. Kiki, do you have more stories for us?
I do have more stories. How about a story about lab-grown livers? Do you like liver?
Like human livers?
Yes. Yes. Lab-grown human livers. Although they're little livers. They're little livers. Researchers were able to take skin cells. These are researchers from the University of Pittsburgh, have taken skin cells and been able to reprogram them to be liver cells. And not just one kind of liver cell. I mean, the liver has multiple types of cells within it. So they were able to reprogram these cells, these skin cells, to be multiple different cell types that exist in the liver to create a little tiny mini liver, and they put these livers into mice, and they grew within the mice, and they took them out, and everything seemed fine. The mice survived for 4 days, and they probably would have survived longer, but that was the end date of the experiment, when they sacrificed the animals to see how the livers had grown and how they had done. The exciting aspect to this is that with the advent of regenerative medicine, of being able to grow all the cell types that are required to grow an organ, this potentially will help us to address the issue of organ shortages. There are hundreds of thousands of people on the organ donation list. About 17,000 people are waiting for livers right now in the United States. And each time there's a liver transplant, it's almost $1 million in cost. And if we could potentially grow livers from a patient's own stem cells, it could lead to, it might still be $1 million, but we could at least potentially address all of the 17,000 people who need them, instead of having individuals unfortunately go without, as they do right now.
Well, and livers are kind of an interesting one, because I think the people who need them sometimes get bumped up or down the list depending on all sorts of variables, like if you have a history with alcohol dependence, or how old you are, or if you have other health problems. And that's I would love for everyone who needs a liver to get a liver, and it would be so much easier if you could just grow one.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to decide who, quote unquote, deserves a liver more, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one of the problems. There's inequality in the system at this point in time. There are issues as well with respect to donors and recipients and how well they match up. So, there's the matching that has to take place so that rejection doesn't have to happen. In this particular study, the mice were immunosuppressed because they were getting human cells. And so they didn't want the mouse immune system to react to the human cells. But if you're creating patient-derived regenerated livers, then you're potentially going to not have rejection effects. People wouldn't have to be on immunosuppressive drugs. There are so many things that could go better.
By the way, fun fact, if it did cost $1 million, instead of the $2.3 trillion looting of the U.S. Treasury by giving tax cuts to the already rich, we could pay for all of them and then still have money left over. So even, again, take into account what was taken. And be outraged about that, because even if it was $1 million per, we could have paid for it in that one tax cut.
Yep.
It's all relative.
It is all relative. And if we had universal health care, that would be a lot better too. Everyone who deserves would get, but these are different issues to get into all together.
Right.
Yeah. So the another issue here is that these little livers, they were little. They fit in mice. So we're not looking at things.
Cute little baby liver.
Little baby liver. We're looking at vascularization of a very tiny little. It looked like a liver. It acted like a liver. It was great, and there was vascularization, and it was fantastic. But it's not going to work for a person unless they can figure out how to increase the size and the durability of the entire structure, which is going to be a bit harder. But no,
baby liver steps. Baby liver steps.
I mean, the fact that we're even at making little baby livers right now is,
I love it.
This is science fiction. We are working into the realm of science of the future. This is the stuff that's so exciting to me. We'll see how long it takes to actually make it happen, but I have faith that it will. Justin, what you got?
Oh, okay. I should have been anticipating the fact that I would be bringing another story tonight. Oh, here we go. I'm going to change the order of the stories. This is researchers at Tulane University School of Medicine identified a gene that actually causes an aggressive form of breast cancer to rapidly grow. This is the triple negative. This is the most dangerous, most untreatable, most aggressive metastasizing form of breast cancer. And there was they had parallel studies that were looking into two genes. It doesn't really matter what they are, but one's TRAF3-IP2 and the other is RAB27A. Genes get weird names. There's just not enough names that sound like something you've heard of before to name every gene. It's just
maybe
too hard.
Think you have a weird name.
No, they do. They look at us and go, how come you all have the same name? How do you differentiate who's doing what? So so the research team studied what happens when these genes were stopped from functioning, suppressing the expression of either gene led to a decline in both tumor growth and the spread of cancer to other organs. This is the research was led by Dr. Riza Izzadpanah, who examined these interactions. And basically what they came up with is they found one that really limited. When one of them was silenced, it really limited the tumor growth. Tumor growth would stop, but there was still a small amount of spread. When they also turned off the second, there stopped being metastasization at all. It stopped metastasizing. There was no little cancer cells going off and latching somewhere else and restarting growth. This is we usually I try to avoid talking about cancer cures historically because everything was a path to leading to a treatment that could someday, but this one looks like a switch. The quoting voice, it is important to note that this discovery is the result of a truly collaborative effort between basic science researchers and other clinicians. But what they basically did was develop a 2-gene switch that can shut down the most aggressive, untreatable form of breast cancer. And now they can create a drug that targets these specific genes to suppress their activity. Pretty huge. They're already working on FDA approval and want to go right into clinical trials from the animal model results because it was that just starkly stunning positive result that they got from this study. So, and with all the bad news going around in terms of where we have a pandemic, we might have a cure, we got to stay at home. We don't know when this is going to. Triple negative breast cancer might have just found the switch that shuts it down.
And if we have a drug, finding the switch, but having a drug that can do that, that's the next best. And if they're already on a path towards that, then
Actually,
awesome.
I think I undersold it. What they actually did was trigger that. They actually switched it. Now it's in mice, right? So you need to now do the study on humans, but they already effectively showed proof of concept. It's not like now we need to actually. It's not that we need it. They did it already. And so now, clinical trials need to start, and we need to see that it works in humans as well. But yeah.
I love, it's always this step forward of at what point do we get excited of it working for people? But at what point is it more than just curing cancer in mice?
And I said mice, but actually, as I'm looking over what I have, I don't have the actual animal model that it was utilized in. That was I was paralleling from the other story I was talking about. But still.
But in general, there's so many stories about curing whatever in mice. It's always in mice first, and then the drug doesn't work in people. It causes too many side effects in people. There's, so many reasons why something won't go forward into treatment. And so there are a lot of hoops that still need to be jumped through for sure. But having something that is such a specific target is, it's a cleaner shot. We're getting there. That's exciting. Yeah. I love it. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go from there into kind of, negative land. Sad negative land.
Like the back end of a magnet, or like sad?
Like
Negative.
sad,
Oh, no.
Climate change.
Not that.
The thing that we haven't been
Don't they
talking
know
about.
we're busy?
I know. I've been, specifically with COVID and all of the pandemic and things going on, I've been avoiding climate change news, but it's ongoing. And a new study out, I found it interesting because we've talked about this general trend in the show previously, which is that animals have been found to they're making shifts toward the poles. And this is something we've talked about previously. We know that that weather is changing, climate is changing. There are lots of organisms that are finding their ecosystems are no longer working for them, and they have to follow that the plants are moving, and the animals have to follow the plants, and everything is shifting. And we've discussed this before, but this week, a database was published that brought together 258 peer-reviewed studies comparing over 30,000 habitat shifts in more than 12,000 species of bacteria, fungi, plants, and animals. This is called bioshifts, and this is, aside from being a study, one-off studies, this is the first massive comprehensive analysis of the shifts that are taking place by life around our planet. And the authors published this week and discovered that land animals are moving closer to the poles, but at a pace that's slower than was expected. That the ocean life is moving a lot more quickly than the life that's on land. Amphibians are found to be moving toward the poles. They call that moving upslope at over 12 meters a year. Reptiles seem to be headed toward the equator at 6.5 meters a year. Insects are moving poleward at 18.5 kilometers per year. And in marine species are moving at about 6 kilometers per year, but land animals, that slowness, only 1.8 meters per year. So land animals not moving fast enough, maybe? And are the ocean animals, the marine species, are they, because of the way that the water currents work, is that why they're moving so much more quickly? And the question now arises, will marine species adapt to the fast climatic shifts that are taking place on our planet better than land animals? And I think that is the big question.
And I would assume the answer is yes. And I would largely
guess.
My attribution to that would be speculate that the obstacle for the larger land animals would be humans. Insects can travel regardless of whether there's human development. Out in the ocean, there's no highways to cross. There's no large city further north or south of you, as the case may be, to have to encounter to continue in that direction. I would assume that the obstacle course is humanity.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's
probably
something else. There's also something else, which is plants. So so plants cannot move nearly as fast as an animal.
And large animals might be.
You see animals move, and then the plants don't move with them, and they have to kind of retreat and go like, "Uh-oh, I need those."
Yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
It's a huge barrier that land animals depend on plants that are fairly immobile.
Yes, if
And
your
a lot-
biome doesn't move,
Yeah.
you can't either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it may be a combination of the biomes themselves not moving very quickly and habitat fragmentation, like you're talking about. Yeah. But
I like how Kiki makes us both right.
Bring bring everyone together.
You're all right.
we can be right together. It's okay. But there have been engineers for several years now talking about the possibility and the potential for geoengineering our way out of climate change. Can we use technology and engineering to halt the progression of temperature increase, of carbon dioxide increase here on the planet? Well, some researchers decided to model this. And this is a really good idea. Before actually implementing some of these proposed solutions, maybe try and figure out what they will actually do. Yeah, model them. Yes. So these researchers at MIT wanted to look at the idea of solar geoengineering, and they considered an idealized scenario, which is, that's what they do in modeling.
Giant umbrella.
Yes.
Over like a parasol over the earth to block the sun.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So that's pretty much the idea that they looked at, this scenario in which solar radiation is reflected away from the earth, that we would put not umbrellas, but giant reflectors to aim sunlight elsewhere away from earth. And the situation that they looked at, they wanted to see whether it would be enough to offset the warming that would occur if carbon dioxide quadrupled in concentration. So they were looking at like extreme.
They were looking at like 2060.
Yes. Yes. Which isn't that far away, but anyway. Okay. What they found looking at their research, which they published in Geophysical Research Letters, is that the reduction in solar radiation would work. The geoengineering strategy employed to reflect light away would lead to reduced radiation reaching the Earth, and so there would be less incoming solar heat that would counteract to a degree the warming caused by the carbon dioxide emissions. However, the cooling of the planet would not prevent other greenhouse gas-induced effects like regional reductions in rainfall and ocean acidification. So what ends up happening with this situation is that storm tracks would be changed. And whereas now we're looking at the possibility of increased storms and increased severity of storms, tropical storms, hurricanes, typhoons, with the conditions of their experiment, which they called the G1 experiment of the Geoengineering Model Intercomparison Project, that if solar radiation were to be reduced, there would be unpredictable effects on the atmosphere and those storms. And so storms are often used, they work to distribute energy through the atmosphere. They work to distribute rainfall across the globe. And they also distribute particulate matter. They move things around. This is atmospheric conduction of materials. And it's imperfect. So the bottom line of this story is that reducing solar radiation isn't just going to be a ta-da, we fixed it scenario of fixing global warming. It would actually have potentially negative effects on water distribution around the globe and on particulate matter. What they specifically go into saying is that in the northern hemisphere, there would be much, much, much weaker storm tracks, and that it could end up leading to stagnation, especially during the hot summer months, which would be a lot worse.
Turning down the sun doesn't seem like the sun's not the problem.
No.
I'm having trouble with it. That's like cooking on the stove, right? And touching the burner and being like, ow, I'm burning my hand.
Yeah,
Let me turn the stove off. It's like,
Now, to
no,
be
just
fair.
move your hand.
Now, to be
That's
fair.
not the problem.
To be fair, every year, this is part of global warming right here. This is what it's really all about. Every year, the Earth moves closer to the sun. It's a fact. It's a fact. Also, every year we then move further away again. It's
Yes.
it's
It's an
kinda how that
elliptical
works.
orbit.
Don't we want
kinda
to
how
keep
that
all
works.
that sun
It's kinda-
for, like, I don't know, the plants and, like, for solar panels and, like, I don't know. Why are we trying to turn the sun down?
Yeah, we want more sun for the solar panels. Except then we want to reduce. Yeah, no, it's
The sun's not the problem. The gases are the problem. The heat trapping gases are the problem.
not to take this back to the protests that are happening across the nation and in other places in the world, but gosh darn, and this is the fist through the air. Gosh darn, but why aren't people also activated by this to this degree? I don't understand it. This is destroying of our own habitat globally. We need to learn a lesson. It's so.
It's if we fix racism and inequality, we can also fix climate change. Climate change is and water availability around the globe. These are issues of climate change affects the world's poor
Right.
the most.
Yes.
So
So
it
this
is-
is the other thing. Yeah.
So this is if
part of the whole thing.
It's part of the whole package. Fixing climate change is part of fixing
Equity. Yeah.
inequalities around the world, and that's
it's worse
that's
than
a big part of it.
it's worse than you think because it's not just going to be evenly distributed. The effects, actual sea level rise, is going to be much worse in the southern hemisphere than it is in the northern hemisphere. So the countries who are doing the least contribution to the global warming are
they
going
gonna be
to see
the most effect.
it's sort of like an oh my goodness, it is sort of like a little bit of a correlation to what's going on in the United States right now. There are some people who are living under fascism while the rest are not, and there's a disparity in the societies nationally here in the United States and then globally of people who are living under unequitable conditions. It's wicked still. I can.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, for geoengineering, the researchers say this work highlights that solar geoengineering is not reversing climate change, but is substituting one unprecedented climate state for another. Reflecting sunlight isn't a perfect counterbalance to the greenhouse effect. And another researcher added, there are multiple reasons to avoid doing this, and instead to favor reducing emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases.
And I think I somehow missed
take
part of
that
it,
home.
but was one of because this was an old early solution like aerosolized zinc in the atmosphere or something
Yeah,
like this.
Silver, yeah.
Silver? Was it?
Iron particles. And
Okay.
I think silver
thought
causes
nickel?
rain.
Nickel?
There's-
Zinc? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there are a few.
there's been a few ideas of how to accomplish this, but that's not.
This
Apparently.
is a Twilight Zone episode. Let's block out the sun.
No, let's not. Let's not do
please.
that.
Let's just fix the problem we made.
Yeah. How do we do
Let's
that
learn
again?
how to. I think we are at a point where we can learn how to do a whole lot of things better. And there's already a lot of good research out there on how we can do things better.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is This Week in Science. Want to help TWIS grow? Get a friend to subscribe today.
So Dead Sea Scrolls. This is a collection of 25,000-ish about fragments of ancient manuscripts, including some of the oldest copies, of the Hebrew Bible. This is original source material. So piecing them together has been incredibly difficult because there's so many different pieces. They're small, they're old, they're deteriorating. And also they didn't get excavated from the caves in which they were found and then handed to researchers, or weren't excavated by researchers, but rather most of the fragments filtered their way through the hands of like antiquity, dealers and private collectors first, and then eventually got into the hands of people researching. This is reported in the journal Cell from June 2nd. It's an intriguing clue to help put the puzzle pieces together. Maybe even finding the edge pieces. Because they did, for the first time, DNA sampling of you can't take a piece and destroy it, but there's residue, there's dust that comes off of the fragments. So they did DNA analysis on the fragments, and it turns out a lot of them were on sheepskin, which wasn't known before, but the majority of them are written on sheepskin. This is quotey voice of, who is this? This is Oded Rekavi, Tel Aviv University in Israel. The discovery of the 2,000-year-old Dead Sea Scrolls is one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made. Maybe. However, it poses two major challenges. First, most of them were not found intact, but rather disintegrated into thousands of fragments, which had to be sorted and pieced together with no prior knowledge and how many pieces have been lost, or, in the case of non-biblical compositions, how the original text should even read. Depending on the classification of each fragment, the interpretation of any given text could change dramatically. Yeah, so you've got a book, you've got many books, several books, maybe 1,000 books, who knows, chopped into tiny, tiny pieces. You know, you have sentence fragments, and then they try to piece these things together. This is actually pretty brilliant. The fact that they were largely on sheepskin, some on cowhide. But when you look at the DNA, you can actually see not just what animal they came from, but how related those animals were. So you have two fragments that came from the same sheep. Chances are they're much closer related than something that was written on sheep that have no relation. Mm-hmm. Maybe this fragment came from a sheep that's related to that other sheep fragment. Those might be closer than the one that came from a cow, right? So they started, they did this analysis, and they started piecing things together. Some of it very differently. So this is, who did in this study? There's Rekavi colleagues, including Noam Mizrahi at Tel Aviv University, Israel, and Matthias Jakobsen, Uppsala University, Svenska, Sweden, decided to look deeper, and they did this DNA analysis. Some of the things that were sort of interesting, they found that pieces that were thought to run together, because at first they were sort of doing this visually, morphologically almost, like this looks like it fits with this. This is part of the same text. There was one segment which was part of the prophetic book Jeremiah. Right? This is one of the oldest known scrolls of the Hebrew Bible.
He was a bullfrog, right?
Jeremiah was a bullfrog also. But two of these pieces that were thought to go together to form this story, one, it came from different animals. One was sheep and one was cowhide, which makes them think, these probably came from different versions of the same story. Analysis of these texts found that on these Jeremiah pieces suggest that they not only belong to different scrolls, they also represent different versions of the prophetic book. The fact that the scrolls that are most divergent textually are also made of a different animal species is indicative that they originate at a different provenance. First of all, this is going to help put together pieces that weren't able to be put together and separate pieces that shouldn't have been put together. But it also shows that the early stories of mysticism and Jewish liturgy and some of the other non-sort of secular stories had different versions of them concurrently, which is sort of interesting when we compare it to what modern day religion is, where you have, here is the one text and message, and it is the literal. No, they're in the origins of religions. There were different versions of these religions, which had different texts and different stories and a little bit different.
And even before there was a lot of writing, and you had one scroll, but you had a lot of people going around telling things verbally, and so maybe the story, it changed a little bit as people are talking about it and telling the story from person to person. You have that telephone operator effect.
Yeah, but even in the days of the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were multiple scrolls that had different text.
Yeah,
so the Dead Sea Scrolls are around 2,000 years old, right? Is what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We are currently in the year, in the Jewish year 5780. So you have almost 4,000 years of oral tradition before these scrolls existed. So that is a huge amount of drift. Even assuming there was a common origin on these stories.
Yeah. And people were like, let's write it all down. Let's put it all down.
After it had been oral tradition for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah, absolutely.
Which again just brings the thing that I've always said, which is there was a written language in China at the time. Why not start with people who could write it down? Why not start there?
That's a good question.
just take the message to people who can literally transcribe it.
It's not like
Why take it to illiterate?
It's not like they had planes, trains, and automobiles.
No,
back
Justin's
then.
saying the big man upstairs. If he had such an important,
he should have written it.
Big man upstairs.
Yeah,
he should have taken it to the one people who had a finely defined written language first. And not put it in the hands of the illiterates who had to wait thousands of years before they could write it down. I'm just saying.
They were talking to different big men and women upstairs, weren't they, at the time?
They were,
so,
yes.
There you go.
I'm convinced it's all the god Loki playing a trick on the other guy. But that's fine. We can all have our version of the stories, right?
Yeah.
This way we get more stories. It's better.
Yeah.
It's better that way.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Speaking of more stories, let's jump to the last couple of stories. Justin, this one is specifically for you.
Okay. Now I'm both cringing in anticipation and excited to hear what the story might be.
Yeah, you should be a little
excited.
Cringe-sighted.
There's cringe-citement going on at the moment. Yes. Okay. Well, researchers in South Australia decided that they needed to test a methodology for getting rid of feral cats. And so they have completed and published their field trial results of Felixers, which are a device that sprays poison on the identified target, a cat. So they tested 20 Felixers that were set to fire their poison across vehicle tracks and dune crossings for 6 weeks. They recorded cat activity, and they used track counts and grids and remote camera traps to be able to record this activity. They also had radio collars on 6 of the cats. They found that none of the non-target objects, betongs, bilbies, birds, lizards, humans, or vehicles that passed a Felixer was fired on. The Felixers only, they had high target specificity, according to this abstract. They only fired 33 times over the 6-week trial on cats. And they only had 2, they looked at their 2 radio-collared cats that triggered the Felixers during the trial, and they died. So, their results suggest that Felixers are an effective target-specific method of controlling feral cats, at least in areas where cat immigration is prevented. Yes. So now, Australia may have a method for ridding itself of some of the problematic cats in their outback.
The cats in Australia and New Zealand are
a big
There
problem.
should be no cats in New
problem.
Zealand. There should be 0 cats in New Zealand.
They're
Do not
working on
belong
it.
there.
They're working
do
on
not
it. They're
belong
making really good strides in New Zealand because it's small, so it's like easier to address. But in Australia, it's still a huge problem.
Yeah, so they have tried all sorts of methods of poisoning food and trying to get cats to eat the poisoned food, of trapping cats. But this particular method with a poison that sprays the fur of the cats then clean themselves and ingest the poison as they go through their cleaning routine. And it apparently is very effective. So...
I'm so torn. I'm so torn.
I thought you would be.
It's sad, but it's good news for all those bilbies and other
birds and
animals.
lizards.
I love
Big
birds
trouble.
and lizards. I love birds and lizards. I'm sorry.
And bilbies. Bilbies are so cool.
Yeah, so none of those animals are targeted or affected. And it's good that it's specific. It's sad for the cats, but also the cats of Australia and New Zealand, as we said. Big
Don't belong
problem.
there.
They don't belong there. Yeah.
Cane toads and cats. Gotta get them out.
Yeah. All right, Blair. What do you have?
Oh, to all those dog owners out there, you know how sometimes you're roughhousing with a friend and the dog runs up to you and you're like, did they want to play or did they think I'm in trouble? Well, a lot of us have often wondered if our dog would rescue us if we were in trouble. It's a study out of Arizona State University. And this very preliminary study makes it look like, yes, indeed, your dog would like to save you from peril. So they took 60 pet dogs and they had zero training in how to, quote unquote, rescue their owners in distress. And they put the owners in a large box equipped with a lightweight door that the dog would be able of moving aside to get to the owner. And then the owners called out, help or help me.
Oh my.
And they did coach the owners to make sure that they sounded real, which I think is very funny. And then they noticed that about 1/3 of the dogs rescued their distressed owner, which at first doesn't sound very good, right? It sounds like, okay, in general, dogs don't want to save their distressed owner. But in fact,
Depends on the owner.
their control test was that they put food in the box, and only 19 out of the 60 dogs were able to get to the food. So more dogs actually rescued their owners than went for food. Which means that when they consider this a control for understanding of how to get to the inside of the box. When they control for that, it actually looks like it's very good. If you look at only the 19 dogs that were able to open the door to get to food, 84% of them rescued their owners. So actually, it looks like if they know how to get inside the box, it's a pretty big number of dogs that were very interested in getting to them. And then the other control test they did was having an owner just read a magazine inside the box. So they were trying to figure out if the dogs just wanted to know where their owners were. Yeah. And 16 out of 60 went up to their owner, but did not show any signs of stress, like whining, walking, barking, or yawning. And they did a lot of those things when the owner was calling out for help. So this is... it appears to be an inherent desire in dogs to get to their owners when they are in trouble or they appear to be in trouble. So the next step, of course, is to figure out whether the dogs that rescue them do so to get close to the people or if they're really trying to help them and accessing the human physically is not the main motivator. So if they could help, they could assist their human in trouble, even if they couldn't get to them physically to get some pets, would they still do it? So, all in all, your dog cares about you.
Your dog cares. At least 1/3 of the dogs care.
Yeah, which is actually a high number, according to who is able. I don't know.
Yeah.
More study is needed, but I think it's
For
a fun
sure.
preliminary study.
Yeah, but then it gets into the idea of which dogs, like what are there specific breeds, or does it have to do with how how connected the owner and
Right.
the dog are? Like
Yes.
what kind of when did the owner get the dog? Was it when they were a 6-week-old puppy, or when the dog was 3 years old? Did they adopt them from a shelter, or was it given to them by a friend? What are the, there's so many variables.
How long have they
yeah,
owned them?
but-
How close were they? Do they exercise them regularly?
You could probably zero out all of those and
Yeah.
look at 2 factors. Does the dog think that they are higher or lower than the owner in the hierarchy? If the dog thinks it's lower in the hierarchy, it's going to jump to support the
Right.
master dog. If it thinks it's actually the dominant member of the pack, it's like, I don't care who beats up the minors. Doesn't matter to me. I'm still the top dog. You're low on the hierarchy. This is what happens. A more dominant male than you or female than you has shown up in the pack. But
Yeah,
if
they should also figure out whether or not people have practiced having their dogs save them from a box before.
well, okay, there's that. But I have noticed whenever somebody's dog really doesn't like me, it's because I'm kind of the more dominant male.
Or is it because they know you don't like dogs? The dog can sense.
No. Some dogs absolutely love me, but I feel
Well, they
like
couldn't tell.
I feel like those dogs think that they own the house. Those dogs think
Right.
that they are the top dog. It's the dogs that aren't really sure of their position that always are barking at. That's just my dog psychology, pop dog psychology. I admit I'm not diagnosing any specific dogs.
It's from all those
this.
dog
I'm
training
not
courses
licensed.
you've taken. Yeah. All right. I think this brings us to the end of our show here. But as we do come to the end, I want to give you a little bit of homework. I'm going to put a link in our chat rooms, and also I will put it on our website for a YouTube video. It's about an hour and 45 minutes long that the Royal Institute in England put out, and it's a conversation, a panel conversation on Black scientists, past, present, and future. What we can all do is learn more about where Black scientists have come from, the past, what they're doing now, and where they are potentially going to influence science going forward. We need more Black scientists, more people of color, Indigenous scientists, so that there is a representational diversity of views and backgrounds that can give us a better fabric of understanding of our world. There's probably some questions that we have no idea we should be asking because those people who would be asking the questions aren't in science because they've been pushed out for whatever reason. So we all have to do a job to inform ourselves and to learn more and to move forward to bring more people into science and to make it more equitable and diverse. And additionally, this week is Black Birders Week. So if you are aware of the incident that took place in New York City's Central Park last week involving a black birder and a woman who was running her dog off leash in an area that was not allowed to be not off leash. Anyway, it was a whole thing, and it just stood to highlight the daily assaults that Black people are up against in the ecological sciences. There are not many Black birders, and people don't talk about it that much. But this week, there is a celebration of Black birders on Twitter. They're doing all sorts of things. If you look up Black birders, the hashtag Black birders, and I'm also going to put a link to Black AF in STEM. It's a great hashtag with some really great Black scientists, young ecologists, naturalists, birders, people who are doing really great work, and also science communication outreach work. And tomorrow they're going to be doing a live Q&A in the afternoon for those of you who are interested. So the link will send you that direction as well. So I hope to be able to, from where we are with this platform, be able to send you to these places so that you can see what other people in the sciences are doing and what celebrations are happening right now. And on that note, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, remember, please share it with a friend. Shout outs to Fada for help on social media and with our show descriptions. Thanks to Identity4 for recording the show. Thanks to Gord for manning the chat room. And thanks to the Burroughs Welcome Fund for their support. Also, thanks to our Patreon sponsors for your generous support. Thank you to Paul Disney, Andrew Swanson, Stu Pollock, Ed Dyer, Ken Hayes, Kosti Ranky, Craig Landon, Tony Steele, Alex Wilson, Steve DeBell, Joshua Fury, Philip Shane, Ed Luz Science, Mark Mazzaros, Richard Porter, Sky Luke, Brian Condren, Richard, Eric Knapp, Jason Roberts, Matthew Litwin, Jack, Bob Calder, Guillaume, Dave Neighbor, EO, Kevin Parachan, Matt Sutter, Aaron Luthen, Christopher Rappin, Brendan Minish, Greg Briggs, Robert, Gary S., Marjorie, Rudy Garcia, Kurt Larson, Steve Leisman, Sean Lamb, Greg Riley, Jim Drapeau, Lisa Suzuki, Christopher Dreyer, Brian Carrington, Jason Olds, John McKee, Paul, Artyom, Ulysses Adkins, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Dave Wilkinson, Stu Doster, Paul Ronovich, Daryl Myshak, Dave Friedel, John Ratnaswamy, Stephen Albaran, South O'Gradney, Mountain Sloth, Rodney Lewis, Sarah Chavez, Corinne Benton, John Gridley, Jean Tellier, Patrick Pecoraro, Darwin Hannon, Matt Bass, Dan Kay, Sarah Forfar, Donald Munnis, Howard Tan, Josiah Zahner, Taylor P.S., Ben Bignell, Maddie Perrin, Mark Hessenflow, John Atwood, Ali Coffin, Ben Rothig, John Lee, and Flying Out. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show,
we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels, and also from TWIS.org/live. I still can't tell the difference. Is it what?
live.
I know you love looking at our beautiful faces, but if you want to listen to us as a podcast, you can search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you have heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org, and you can also sign up for our newsletter.
Feel free to shout out to us directly. You can email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in that subject line, or we'll never see it, because your email, it'll get spam filtered into oblivion.
You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.